This conference will now be recorded.
Prevents you from having to ban books. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree.
I guess Gracie saw that last.
That's funny.
All right, I'd like to call the Board of Supervisors to order. As always, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. We do have a quorum. We do need to adopt an agenda. Anything to add to the agenda this evening?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody?
Yes,
What would y'all like to do?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second?
Motion is made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Public comment. Public comment. How are we doing, Alan?
Raking them in.
I'm skeptical. Yeah, I'm glad to have him on there. It's too normal, more than normal. Pete, got anything? No? That's a bummer, Pete. All right, public comment's over. We're going to do it again at the end. Consent agenda, we have minutes from 3:02, 3:09, 3:14, and 3:16. Then we have two supplemental appropriations from the contingency assessor and then school board grant. Mr. Weakley, you have anything to say about either of those two?
So the school board, that was a grant they received through DCJS, so that will be pass-through monies, if you will. You do have to supplement for them to use that. And then what that should say, the assessor, it's a use of contingency fund request. There are some additional, not to confuse with the upcoming reassessment cycle. This is additional assessment work that happened through the commissioner's office that was unanticipated.
Anybody have any questions, thoughts, motion?
Can we do them all in just one?
I believe so.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, no special appearances, old business. Mr. Weakley, tell us about the DSS MOU.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is an older item. The existing MOU would stay in place. I think had been updated one time since its original inception. Basically, the county owns the building that Department of Social Services is located and operates from. However, the state notified us several years ago that it is fully depreciated. So therefore, our MOU spells out responsibilities and what they do cover. So they cover operating costs, the electricity, things like that. However, any kind of improvement that is beyond a low, replacement threshold, so let's say something that costs $2,000, they may look to cover that versus something larger. Well, we had that larger example last year. We went through HVAC replacement. It was thought that the state would cover that up front. There was kind of some precedence, a lower amount with the roof replacement. I think that was $20-some thousand. However, the HVAC was a little over $80,000. So the way the MOU reads is that both parties have to mutually agree, but instead of them cutting a check back, one lump sum, here's your fee, it runs through a manager at the state level, and they look at the value of that, and it was determined that they could depreciate this out. However, that needed to be spelled out in the MOU. So we took the depreciation schedule, which is 10 years, which is in accordance to our depreciation schedule and policy. So your term of your MOU also reflects that 10-year period. So this would renew you from 2023 to 2033. Of course, there's termination language should both parties want to do that. But there is The only changes in here is recognizing a 10-year term versus the original, I think it was a 2-year term. And also it would reflect the 10-year depreciation schedule. So there will be a annual reimbursement, should you approve this tonight, of roughly, I think, around $8,200 to $8,400 each year over the next 10 years to pay the county back for the HVAC expense.
Anyone have questions, comments, thoughts?
One thing, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if Supervisor Hoffman wishes to talk about it or not, but I believe the DSS board, ma'am, heard this today and also approved it at the DSS board level.
Valerie said we could pay a little bill each month with what we were getting.
And this has also been reviewed and approved by Mr. Gregg, and it has the approved form signature should the board approve it tonight for Mr. Gregg.
So Charlotte, that $702 or whatever it was,
706.
706, comes from directly a check from them in
I think it
town?
comes
All
from the- I think it comes from
comes
the
from-
state DSS.
okay.
I don't believe it comes.
God, I
from-
can't believe we
I
want
don't know.
cut a
We didn't really
$700.
So yeah, there's a
Check
state,
to
so you have local funding, but then you have the state. So the check would come from the state.
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought.
So even though that's the Madison chapter, well, I shouldn't say chapter, it's the Madison DSS office, it is a state agency.
Yeah.
Breaking it in.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the updated MOU between Madison County and DSS, and we authorize county administrator to sign the MOU.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, who are we starting with? Sean, you want to start with the sign ordinance update?
Sure. A couple of things. I've done a fair amount of work on it. One of the issues that we have, I suppose the good news is. Why don't I go ahead and start over? I've done a little bit of work on it in terms of what we can do, and the good news is the county can impose whatever rules it wants on its own property, and that includes prohibiting signs. I have not received a definitive answer from anybody with the local government folks about whether the registrar's office becomes a polling place. My sense is that it does not. I have a memorandum that kind of summarizes some of this. I think probably the best thing for us to do is going to be to pass an ordinance that prohibits any signs of any kind other than government signs on these premises. With regard to the Kriglersville property, and again, I've drafted an ordinance that I will share with y'all to consider passing, but the biggest concern I have at this point is there have been some developments in the law about what restrictions you can place on political signs at all in terms of their time and place restrictions. I'm not certain that, I'm not confident as to what the right answer is on those. So my proposal would be that we defer this to the next meeting. Hopefully I'll have some better answers, and I will share with each of you my proposed ordinance so that everyone can look at it and pick it apart. We will need to have a public hearing on this. It'll have to be advertised for 2 weeks, so we will coordinate with the newspaper and take care of it. We will have it done comfortably before November.
Shouldn't we also say something about, I mean, you've got in here as your little brief proposal, it's only county, state, or federal signage. Trying not to leave out, like, the historical society that has an open sign. Could we put tenants?
I think once it is a tenant, once there's a tenant on the property, it's really not county property anymore because the tenant has the right to use it, type of thing. But we can certainly add that to the
No,
ordinance.
That's fine, that's a good comment. Who else has comments on this?
Well, I just want to ask, so Sean and Hannah, y'all going to check with whatever you come up with, run it through the electoral board to make sure they, I mean, I don't know how up on something like this they would be, but I would certainly want their blessing, that's all.
If I may interject, and certainly both gentlemen can answer. What you have in your packet was a carryover from last time.
Right.
So this was, and Lauren had a sick child, so she couldn't be with us tonight. But this, what you had, the first item in your packet that says section prohibited signs, that was what came from the electoral board. I think there was one comment that Larry or Ms. Thomas made. We'll have to go back and capture that. The second attachment that's in your board packet is your existing ordinance, so that gives you an idea of what we have in place and where either legal or yourselves would have ideas where to maybe place the amendment, because that's what we would cite in the public hearing advertisement when we get to that front. So the first attachment was the electoral board's recommendation, but certainly I think as a courtesy, whatever Mr. Gregg and Mr. Wright would recommend, we can circulate to them and ask for their recommendation or thoughts before it comes back to the Board of Supervisors.
And I can share with you what I am thinking. Our current ordinance says, under section 12-1-2, subparagraph 11, political sign, a temporary sign not illuminated 40 square feet or less in area, presenting a candidate or issue, subject to federal, state, or local government plebiscite. I didn't know we had plebiscites, but such sign may not be erected more than 5 months prior to the date of the voting and shall be removed within 1 month after the voting. I would propose, until I do some additional research on that section, leaving it as is, but then adding the next two proposals. First one would be, no sign shall be placed at the county property located at 414 North Main Street, Madison, Virginia. And then paragraph C of the same section would be, political signs are permitted on the premises of Cribgersville Elementary School on the day of any primary or general election. Any signs erected shall be removed within 24 hours after the polls for the election close. I think that takes care of what the board has been concerned about, and I understand the concern about limiting or restricting signage for the property that we currently have leased to the Historical Society, but I think we're protected on that because of the fact that it is leased property.
Jim, you have comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I'm just going to reiterate the point that I brought up previously. Generally, I agree with the proposed change in that we should essentially ban third-party signs. My only concern goes back to, again, it's a First Amendment issue with me. Since in Virginia now we don't have election day, we have election season, which runs a month and a half. And I think this last election, was it like 35–40% of votes were cast early and were cast here. So the registrar's office has become a de facto polling location, whether we like that or not. And I'm wondering if there just isn't some way that we couldn't come up with some type of variance on this new ordinance that does permit campaign signs in a particular location for a particular period. And then one of the reasons I'm pushing that, I guess, is from my own experience, in general elections, particularly when the local offices are being sought, these are oftentimes the least recognizable or the least motivational reason for people to go to the polls. They're going to elect a senator or a representative or a governor. But, you know, and this is my experience working the election polls every election. We have people come up to the tables and they're like, who should I vote for supervisor? Or who should I vote for in a local office? And it's like, well, I don't know these people. I know nothing about them. And I just feel that, you know, this is one way to help get the recognition out, particularly for local candidates. So that's just, I'm just throwing that idea out there as possibly something that we could craft into this proposal. And that's...
Well, I'm happy to consider what you're really talking about is restrictions on allowing the signs, but restricting
A sign zone.
the sign. Yeah, I mean, basically a signboard out front. The issues you're going to run into is somebody's going to have an 8x10 placard, the next person's going to have a 12x14 placard, and we're going to run out of space on the bulletin board.
And I'm gonna put something up that's about 39 square feet. I mean, that's a big sign. I mean, good Lord, we've gotta be restricted.
And remember, for the and what I read you with regard to the 40
property
square feet,
restricted.
that is what is our current ordinance.
Yeah, it
And
needs
but-
to-
and that is for private property.
Needs
You
to
know, and
change.
that's,
And I could, you know, follow on. I think part of any allowance of campaign signs on this property, they should be limited to yard sign size. I would not permit anything larger than that, because generally speaking, that's what you find anyway. I know during the election season, that's coming in back and forth. Most of the signs were just the yard signs.
Of course, the other, and there have been some Supreme Court decisions on this over the last several years. We have entered the perpetual campaign cycle. Elections never end. If you don't believe it, you can see signs from the 2020 presidential election that apparently will be helpful for some people in 2024. They've never come down. And the way our ordinance reads, it says, that they've got to be removed within 1 month after the date of voting. That's simply not enforceable. Or if it is enforceable, we are not enforcing it. There are several signs on Route 15. Jim, you've passed them as frequently as I have. I guess my point is this assignment is a little more complicated than I expected it to be. But I think I can have, I've already got an ordinance based on what I'd originally understood. Adding to this, I can work up something that might be
What about coming
feasible.
up with some options?
Well, that's
really
exactly what I was thinking.
Where we're at.
I would just ask, so if the inclusion of the area, definitely the political signs make sense for that approach. How do we eliminate you got junk, you got cash, I buy houses, those types of signs?
Well, and our ordinance kind of covers that in some other areas. Okay, you've got this.
You know what I'm talking about. They're all up on telephone poles and fast internet, which is false advertisement, but.
But, and we can revisit, our sign ordinance in its entirety.
Okay.
What I was focused on, quite candidly, was simply protecting the administrative offices and the Criglersville School.
No, let's not go through the whole sign ordinance.
No, I meant
No,
just
let's
this
not do
area
that.
for those type of
We're
signs.
all against the cash for clunker signs or whatever. Let's see if we can figure out some options that pertain to what we're actually talking about with the political signs, either here. It sounds like you've got a exception for the Criglersville polling place, which seems appropriate. Come back next month with a little more research.
We can do that, sure.
Does that work for everybody?
Okay. And if
Yeah,
anybody has
absolutely.
comments, I will share this draft with everyone. Jonathan, I'll just give it to you tonight, and and there's some language on the front end of it I need to change. I'll send it to you in the morning.
All right, thank you,
Okay.
sir.
All right, any other questions, comments, thoughts on this one? All right, let's move on. EMS renovation.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I don't believe I put anything in the packet, but maybe limited here. Let me bring it up. I just kind of want to check the pulse on the board and see where you're at. If you may recall, since the beginning of deciding to acquire the former rescue squad property, the board formed a renovation committee. Supervisor Hoffman, Supervisor Dawson, myself, and others are on that committee. Then you commissioned or approved a PER. We've now received that. You all have received that. We discussed really in the kind of the cost estimate and schedule, if you will. I brought that back to the board, kind of a slimmed down version of just some things I observed and you all discussed. So I want to really check the temperature of the board to see if there is a next step. What is that next step? We had a small discussion, not a lot of it, at the last meeting we all were together. So if the board is really comfortable with those discussions we had so far, my recommendation, next step would be securing engineering services for, one, developing a scope of work, which would include engineering drawings and putting together a bid packet, and asking one of our professional service agreements to do that. Now, certainly you can go out for an RFP and find a different engineer, if you will. I think who we have in-house could, under contract, could handle that. So really, it's just throwing it out as a new business item, but just to see if you all are poised to move forward to that next step. I know you all recently approved a new re-up, if you will, the lease agreement for our existing EMS headquarters, but this would get you to move along. In your CIP, the board has, and I know it's draft, but you have added funding in there for the renovation, assuming something would occur in FY '24. So if you're at a good place, I would ask you to consider authorizing me to solicit engineering, utilizing our existing PSA, our professional service agreements, for the purpose of moving forward to produce a scope of work for the renovation project, drawings, and the generation of a bid packet.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. There you go. Fantastic. Arcade building. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the, I think our first meeting during the budget, we talked a little bit about capital, and that was fresh off of the facilities condition assessment report. You may recall that included both schools and county facilities. So going through that report was somewhat alarming, and you look at facilities that may be occupied or have less use versus others, the arcade being one of those. And it was during that time, I was directed to bring it back in March as a discussion item. I included in the packet the current lease. I've also provided that lease to Sean to review. It's a little different. There's some terminology in there about code section and about the option of a judge involving in this. Staff is not recommending any action, but that staff, you all are the board. So really bringing it back as a discussion item because that was your direction during the budget season. So that's why it's being brought up here tonight. So really any direction you have for staff or any questions, we stand ready.
All right, who would like to start with this one?
Well, I'll start. I'm inclined to agree with staff on this one. I mean, should someone come along with an offer that's too good to pass up, I say we take it up. But until then, we've got far more pressing issues to resolve than dealing with the arcade building this time. That's my thoughts. I say I say let's kick this can down the road.
But you do have a deteriorating building
Yeah.
that, you're gonna have to put some money into it or sell and let somebody else put some money into it.
What I would recommend to that point, thank you, Ms. Hoffman, is, so we'll have the 5-year CIP that you all will ultimately adopt. I have really, not saying that I haven't somewhat vetted the remaining out years, but I really went through that FY '24 when we started talking about scales at the landfill and other things. So I would think that maybe the appropriate thing is I can go out and find some masons or different contractors and see if there's a different maybe price or a different scope of work that comes away from that. Because we need to know that anyway as we're updating our CIP.
How much was in there to do
It was revised from last time. It was revised one time before. I think the story or the information I received from the draft I received to the final product, it jumped. And I was told that was due to inflation and they were reflective of the market. So I'm not saying we received bad information. I'm just saying I would like to test that information with some local masons to see their thoughts. But that can be done at any time, and quotes cost you nothing. So I just think it's worthy of the cost.
Everybody gung ho and letting Jonathan talk to his people and see if he can find some quotes on maybe repointing. I figured it's been in that state since the fire.
I'm not inclined to spend
And we would just
fine for a long time later.
And we would just update, sir, our asset inventory list, if you will, with that information. That wouldn't come back around to you unless you ask for it until like the following CIP cycle. So that's my approach to it, unless you tell me something different.
There you go. All right. Anything else on that one? All right. Public hearing on administrative fees, tax rates, and ordinance.
Yes, sir. Looking back and at the various different things that have to be approved through the budget process, one, let me clarify, you're still having a public hearing, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, on your budget. That will go in this Thursday's Eagle. There was a long story. It did not get published last week, but we're still fine with that. However, moving forward, administrative fees and the tax rate ordinance is something you have to have a public hearing on. Those advertisement guidelines or really requirements, by the state. It's different than if you're changing some things. So if you remember on administrative fees, Jamie Wilkes, our building official, had some recommendation of, I think it was plumbing and electrical. So that's reflected in those fees, so that's a change. So your requirement of advertisement is 2 advertisements. The first and second are 7 days apart, and then that last one is 14 days before the public hearing. So those will run the 30th and the 6th. We're using the Daily Progress too. This is no offense, we love Gracie, but we're running it in additional papers to make sure publishing occurs. But they will be advertised on March 30th and the 6th to keep, to meet those requirements. So different public hearing from the 11th. This will be on April 25th, but that needs board action to occur.
Questions, thoughts, what would y'all like to do?
So if you're looking for a motion, the recommended motion would be moved to set public hearing for April 25th for the purposes of, to hear administrative fees and tax rate ordinance.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Thank you all.
Another exciting topic. The VDOT 6-year plan.
This is, all of these are information and correspondence. However, the VDOT one's a little longer. Spoke to Ed San Nicolas. He will be our main point of contact. Ms. Shepherd's still there, but Ed's kind of been appointed our person. I've been working a lot with them regularly on the secondary 6-year road plan or secondary 6-year plan. Every spring, you all discuss and ultimately vote on that, whether it's keeping the same roads or adding new roads or deleting roads. That is the Board of Supervisors' responsibility. So if you are happy with this direction, we'll move forward. The plan was to bring VDOT's draft plan to you on April 11th. I realize you have a public hearing that night on the budget, but we have them go first. It shouldn't take that long. And then set a public hearing date for that 6-year plan on May 9th. For the April 11th meeting, I'll have some correspondence to include in the packet. I know residents of Woolbert Hollow Road have given me a letter and petition of signatures to ask for that road to be included. I anticipate Tussing Lane to be another one, and possibly a segment of Clore Road up to kind of past where River Road and Clore Road meet. So anything I receive from the citizens, certainly I'll include in the packet. If you are fine with that, we have them coming on April 11th for your draft. You have time to act on a May 9th public hearing, setting that date at your April 11th meeting, if you choose to do so. So that's kind of our roadmap, if you are fine with.
Can we add both sections of the desert?
I'll go back and look at Desert. I believe Desert's already on that, and maybe part of that has began. What you did add last year was a new item, was that Turner Drive is not quite 0.7 miles, and only about 0.37 of that, it's sad I'm remembering this, 0.37 miles of that are wide enough to qualify for rural rustic, so that is paving. It's a little chip and tar. The other part, and we might as well get into this now that we're talking about it, we're working with residents. There would be additional right-of-way that's needed for that last portion to widen it. And there's a different funding stream. It may not be 6-year road funding, but it would be VDOT funding from the state that could take care of that. But it's an all-of-nothing approach. So all residents would have to agree to that right-of-way, which includes ditching and stormwater and all that fun stuff. So I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but there will be a notation. I'm asking them to recognize that as potential phase 2, not to be confused that phase 1 is already in your 6-year plan. But that was the newest addition to your 6-year plan last year, was that small portion of Turner Drive.
Turner Drive looked like they were a pretty unified group.
We have one resident that likes to be outside of the group that we're working with, so.
They seem like pretty pleasant people.
Yeah, so we're trying to get that done, but it's all or nothing approach. We really don't have any control, but I've been using one resident, kind of the point of contact, and then myself and VDOT, so it doesn't get too much overlapping. So to be continued on that. So are you fine with April 11th, hearing your draft, and possibly on the 11th, setting your public hearing date for May 9th meeting, which is your first meeting for the 6-year plan, which the public would come out and make their case for their road?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've just
Everybody
got,
good?
oh, go ahead, Jim.
I got one question for Mr.
Yeah, so my question is, so on April 11th, what's in the draft? Is that all the stuff you've collected and you've, how does, what's in the draft on
What-
April 11th?
What I like, I'm sorry.
Okay, that
It
just
has
gets
to-
rolled
it is.
forward.
It's just what we passed
There,
last year.
there are, but there are some, so normally you have stuff that drops off or
Yeah.
will be, they'll move to a construction phase. So they look at out years, right? So it's not just that 1 year or whatever. So if there's any leftover funding or available money, monies, they'll recommend additional roads, and that's based on traffic count. So Jeff Garr, the local superintendent or whatever his position is here, Ed St. Nicholas from the Charlottesville office, they're already discussing those roads, those additional roads, and when they have that ready, they will send it to me, I will send it to you all. So it will be roads that were on the plan last year, and any potential new recommendations. That'll be in your packet. I'm also going to include the other letters of the citizens. What I would prefer, if you all, when you open it up, if you allow me to do kind of a little introduction, what's in the packet with the board report, I'll let you know what's included, those citizen record, and then we'll give it over to Ed to give their draft, and you all will shape your 6-year road plan from there.
Yeah.
When you are communicating with VDOT, if you would solicit an update from them on what their plans are for repairing Route 230.
We will.
It's falling apart.
So thank you for that. So today I spent some time riding around, and Brian got to be my chauffeur so I can actually write addresses. I'm learning more about that schedule. It's I don't want to say weird, but they really select paving well in advance. So you have a perfect example, Fishback Road. I'm saying this in a positive light. We want our roads repaired. Fishback Road, falling apart. We drive it regularly. But it's on calendar year 2024's paving list. So they have to do something with it now unless everybody's going to get alignments over the next year. So that will be addressed with their maintenance funds, but they will repave that in 2024. I have their paving schedule, and I'll share this with you all, for 2022, which is elapsed, and 2023, which is the year we're in now. East 230 is on that list, but we're not finishing West 230. So we're working with them on that. What I was told last year when the patches stopped was there's more. You can see the little white paint. That's their punch list item for their paving contractor. And I was told they ran out of funding, that when the funding occurred or re-upped in July, they would go back. So those, I'm looking at either maintenance items that they need to keep and correct before they do the repaving. But I don't know what goes into the paving schedule. I'm sure it's traffic count and a lot of different things, but I'm seeing roads on the list that maybe could, in my humble opinion, I'm not an engineer, wait and other roads being taken care of first. So if you all have any, please send them to me. I've reached out to the sheriff, and those are the roads I ran today. Their department gave me a list. I've reached out to Superintendent Graham. She sent it to their transportation supervisor, who hopefully will give me a list. For calendar year 2025, because 2024 is developed, I haven't received that list yet. They need that by April the 28th, so they can work to finalize. And finalizing for them, they vet it internally, and then someone at the state kind of, I don't know if you want to say scores it, but they're making sure it meets criteria, because they're looking at spending throughout the whole state. So that's a mouthful, but that's how the process works. But I can assure you that's one of my pet peeves. I look at roads. I was informed, I think Oak Park certain parts have been paved, 3 different cycles over the last 3 or 4 years. And I literally gave them address from Lucille Carpenter's farm past Beaver Dam Run. That's horrible. So if you see roads, general public sees roads, email me. I'm gonna go out and ride them myself to see, you know, what needs it or versus what they have on their schedule.
Government efficiency. 2025 is looking good for us, Jim. All right, any other questions on this? We're gonna get our draft on the 11th, and then we do a public hearing on May 9th.
You could, I will ask for action
Yeah,
for that.
absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And, yeah. Budget public hearing, April 11th.
That's just letting you know that that will be published. We saw I don't know if that was a proof or affidavit, we got, but we also have that running in Sunday's daily progress. So we're gonna meet the requirement come one way or the other. Moving on to motocross and Heritage Day, and I appreciate, Chief Helm is out in the audience, our emergency management coordinator as well. I did go back and review these, Mr. Chairman. I know the question came up about the days of the event. First up, I'll take Heritage Day first. Heritage Day will be on Saturday. I believe that had a 400 participant over there. The way your ordinance is written as it's addressed to permit applications. Anything over 300 participants requires a permit application. Anything under 750 participants, the zoning administrator is authorized to sign that. Anything over 750 participants, I'm authorized to sign it, but it comes to you first before I sign. Both events, I will ensure you, I can't remember if it's in the ordinance, but both events I have required to go around through our first response community, all funneled through our emergency management coordinator to make sure we have the proper incident action plan. I'm probably getting these terms wrong. You know, and every department has weighed in on this. And then once the green light comes back through from Chief Helm, then if it's a lower threshold, Ligon will sign off and it's sent back to the applicant. If it is a higher threshold, obviously we're still going to run it through that process so you know you're looking to approve an event that has run through the same procedure. If you vote to approve it, I sign it, send it back to the applicant. So that's your current process. This is making you aware, so we're following our ordinances. We've signed off on it, but it's went through that process of approval. So Heritage Day is Saturday, motocross is on Sunday.
How many people at Heritage Day?
Both applications had 400 people for that, for each event. The motocross, the difference of this motocross application versus the last one was the Hare Scrambler event, and that was more of a championship. I don't motocross, but this is what I've looked. It's a championship series event, and that had a application of 1,000 people. This one is not the championship event, and I don't remember the name of it. It is a motocross event, but it had an application participant of 400 people. And that will be held on Sunday. The application was inaccurate. It had it as 2 days, but that event will be on Sunday.
How many people go to Heritage Day, Pete?
So we can go up and do a little.
No, we're not doing it. Very popular. It's a good thing for everybody. Absolutely.
So the only way I can look to see, I mean, we can either go by what they've put and go up there and look and just kind of treat that as a lesson learned next year. I don't know if that changes the IAP, the incident action plan that's put in place before that. Or I could find the email and put it on the screen and you can take a vote to approve it tonight. But based on the threshold, the applicants they put in, the information we received in our ordinance, that's why it's brought to you as information and not action. Thank you.
It's not gonna change anything, whether there's 1,000 people or 400, so that will change anything from our capital plan. We're gonna have an ambulance there, who's dedicated to do that, and all that on Sunday. As far as Heritage Day, we were not stationing the ambulance there, we had a non-dedicated vehicle, and we could possibly there. I don't think it's ever happened.
Right.
The high risk for the motocross, we want to have an ambulance on the
Do we have any questions or comments about this? think it's great things are happening in Madison.
And you all had
Right
the discretion, if you like that ordinance to change, you obviously establish the ordinance. If you want a different threshold, please advise, and we'd be happy to work on that. That's just information of what your existing ordinance state as far as who's authorized to sign. But definitely, I felt worthy you all should know about these events, whether you're participating or you get phone calls, so. All right, and then one last that, forgive me, I should have put on it, but it is information. The IDA board, and thank you, the chairman's here tonight, Chairman Elliott, will be meeting on Thursday. It has been published. The packet is online. Usually, a meeting's only called if they're hearing something. I think in years past, it's either been Plow Harf and mainly Woodbury Forest. Woodbury Forest has been able to favorably restructure some debt, and they have asked the IDA board to come together to review, discuss, and consider approving of those documents. So that is being held here Thursday night. IDA members will be here to vote on it. That's within their commission and authority to do. So that's all, Mr. Chairman, I had under information and correspondence.
Anybody have questions on any of those items? Discussion items? The only one, Alan tells me he's got an answer on our Zoom versus GoToMeetings. What'd you figure out?
So, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Bruce and I went back, we compared GoToMeeting and Zoom. Remarkably, they are almost exactly alike. Both of them contain a chat option, a call-in option. We can record it. The only minute details that are going to be differences between them is GoToMeeting has basically 365 days of cloud recording storage. So if we record something here, we have it for a whole year, and then it gets deleted. Zoom has 10 gigabytes. So for us, that'd probably be around 4 or 5 meetings that we could record before our storage with them would be up. And the other thing is Zoom per year is going to be around $40 cheaper than GoToMeeting. So we're prepared to go either which way that y'all would like. I think IT's general recommendation would be to stick with GoToMeeting because we currently use it, EMS uses it, and we could go in any direction, but that's just our general recommendation.
And I would just add, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, to that. I'm in agreement with IT's recommendation, but also whichever platform you choose, just keep it to one. So we don't have, I mean, that was the whole reason of getting staff to reduce that. We were doing, I keep getting Vimeo and Venmo. One transfers money, the other one, what is it?
Vimeo.
Thank you, Vimeo. That's why they are in IT, not myself. Thank you, sir. So we were doing multiple platforms, which means you're paying for multiple subscriptions. So it's just getting it down to one service. We're already paying for a subscription. I know EMS and others use it, whether it's for staff meetings. And of course, not all staff is on site. Sometimes you offer it. So whichever platform the board prefers, I just recommend one platform.
So we're going to do a bunch of platforms. Everybody good with the IT recommendation? Sounds right. Thank you for coming back to us with some information. Anybody else have anything? Public comment. Public comment. Still nothing? Yeah, that happens. All right, public comment's closed. We have no closed session. What would y'all like to do?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This conference is no longer being recorded.